me a host? Or? Okay, all right, great, thanks. All right. Sarvesh, do you want to make me a host or you will be there? Sarvesh, I can't hear you.
So, sir, I'm making the host. Okay.
All right. If you are there, then there is no problem. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, we are live. Okay.
All right, sure. Thanks. So thanks, Sarvesh. So thanks, Ravi. Welcome to today's session, YouTube live session. Thanks for joining us today, first and foremost. And I hope everything is good.
All well. Thank you so much, Shalendra.
Right.
And Skillet, yeah. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you well. Yes,
okay.
I can. And best wishes for Ugadi, Gudi Padwa. And, let's begin the session. So, Ravi, one thing that, we are hearing a lot, there's a lot of buzz around, FinTech, right? And it's not today, maybe last about a decade or so, there's a lot of buzz around it, right? Mm-hmm. We see a lot of startups, big valuations, banks facing competition, banks acquiring FinTechs, right? So many things going on. So what exactly is this, FinTech? When we say FinTech, how do you look at that as an expert and, how do you define that? What FinTech is?
Okay. So it's a very broad question. And you're right. I think all this started 10 years or even longer, though everyone talks about it in the last 2-3 years. And in the budget also, the finance minister talked of unicorns, right? Yeah. So basically, the definition is very simple. It's basically any company uses internet, mobile devices, software, technology, or cloud to perform or connect with financial services. Okay, so standard. And many products are designed for consumer facing, but there's a lot also on B2B technologies. Okay, so basically, it's not something radical, but I'll explain why it has become so big as it is. In fact, if you go back to the history, I think somewhere in 1867 was the first transatlantic cable, and the telegram was sent by the Queen to the President of US. Okay, even 1967, Barclays opened its first ATM. Right, so that's also a service delivered. Right, so how did things come together? Right, I mean, first, if you look at it, people are all having a smartphone. Right. In fact, many would be watching this on YouTube on a phone, right? The thing is, smartphones existed in the 90s. In fact, IBM actually pioneered, but like many things IBM did, it never really got the credit. But correct. BlackBerry came with a smartphone. I'm sure we would have used it. Not many young users would have used it.
We used to carry BlackBerry.
Yeah, indeed. And then 2007 is when Apple came with its iPhone, and then immediately Google came, HTC came with the Android. Yeah. So one is the availability of smartphones has just picked up in the last decade and a half. Second is the cost of mobile data, mobile users. So everyone started having they expect things on their mobile phone. Yeah. So you see what has happened is while people still use browsers, the need to go to a branch if you want to check your bank statements, people started expecting services on their mobile. Okay, but then fundamentally, more importantly, if you look at the corporate, the institutional level, the expansion of Amazon started its early cloud thing rightly in about 2005. Yeah, so cloud as a service, and I think for those who want to understand, cloud is basically all the servers and things which used to be on a data center is moved out and managed by companies like Amazon, Google, or Oracle, and so IBM. It's just that the actual servers are neither at the customer premises, but it's at a third-party premises. So that's basically cloud. Yeah, I know there are a lot of memes about cloud, but I think for the audience, it's a very simple thing. So the cost of storage, the actual server cost started coming down radically from 2013. So you see what is happening, a convergence. Cost of storage coming down, the wider adoption of cloud, because people used to worry, if I put things on cloud, is it secure? But all of us have been using email, which is on cloud for the last 2.5 to 3 decades, right? This session on YouTube and Zoom is on cloud. In fact, there's a special thing called as, platform as a service and a software as a service, right? We don't own YouTube, we don't own Zoom, but we're using as a service. So this is an example of cloud. So the cost of storage, the adoption of cloud as a third party, the penetration of mobile, and the cost of storage, all that has come down, new smartphones. So what do you see what is happening is the cost of setting up a company or a startup used to be $5 million in 2000. In 2011, it has come to $5,000. And probably now it's probably $2,000-3,000. So you see what has happened is people who had ideas, now they realize that they could reach out to customers. Everyone has a mobile phone, everyone has a computer. And that is when the explosion has happened. One, so technology-wise, all things have come together. The costs have come down and more people have started creating the smartphones. So the last count, Apple has probably about 2 million apps and Android has about 3 billion apps, right? All of us have some 30, 50, 60 apps on the phone, all right? All of us, right?
Absolutely.
So what has happened is all the costs have come down. Now every piece of development is made so that it is available on a mobile phone or a browser, okay? And they don't have to set up a data center. They could provision it through a Microsoft or a Google. So broadly, applications are now exploded because the other reason is there's a lot of innovation capital gone into this. So in some FinTech is basically the services that is provided to customers are B2B, but the costs have come down. So the last 9 years or 8 years, it has just exploded. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thanks. I think thanks for explaining the concept, because many people are not aware of the history, right? We think it's a very recent phenomenon, but also for putting the context around why it has become so important and such an important enabler now with cloud and the smartphones, etc. So great. So now again, see the buzz around fintech is like you look just open any economic for example, you open Economic Times, you look at Live Mean, Business Standard, or you even go to, let's say, Times of India, right, which is fairly sort of generic kind of a coverage. It's a huge amount of buzz, and there are certain areas in fintech which are, I think, extremely hot areas, right? So a lot of investment is going into that, jobs are getting created, new kind of technology is emerging, and a lot of disruption is happening. So which are those key areas, if you talk of fintech as a whole, which are those key areas in which a lot of exciting things are happening as you see it right now?
Yeah. So let's look at India and then look what's happening globally. All right. Now, one of the things, especially in India, which we know from 2016, the payments has taken off, right? UPI, right? So I think all of us sit at home and previously we should go to a branch, but then we should do banking, but payments, we just do it through UPI. So payments has taken off. And it's not just the consumer payments, right? If you look at, and RBI produces some very fantastic documents, what you can see from 2011, the focus on, not just on UPI, but on bill payment, right? We all have to pay our electricity bill. We don't go. I'm sure I belong to the generation where we stand in the electricity line and pay the bill.
Yeah, it was, we had to plan, you will take leave or your wife will take leave, or how will you manage that, right? So half a day leave at least was required. Yeah.
So now you have bill pay, right? That's another utility provided by the RBI, which is using also the National Payments Corporation of India. Then recently, in the last 3-4 years, you heard about the FASTag, right? That is also a toll collection. So you see what has happened is, and then there's NEFT, RTGS, IMPS, right, which we still use to make payments. Obviously the push towards digitalization, the availability of consumer payments, retail payments is one. Now that has opened up to make available loans easily, right? The easiest thing for a customer is to borrow, right? Which is the normal thing from a retail customer. And so there's a lot of uptick on lending, not just in India, but lending is the easiest one for most fintechs to focus on. Yeah. So digital payments, lending, loans, yeah, which is basically loans. Yeah. And the other thing which is very important, and we'll see that in India very soon in a year, the regulators have also been one of the reasons why fintechs have exploded. Let me explain this, right? Till say about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, UK had some 7-8 big banks. We're called as the Main Street banks. Like maybe if you roll back India 30 years ago, it was a public sector and you just had the ICICI, HDFC coming in.
Yeah.
So the reason why a bank is in such a monopoly position is because they got a license, right? They have license and their capital, and then they have customers and they do retail banking and so on. So there is no incentive for them to innovate beyond a point, all right? So they would have systems, the customers don't like it, they have to go to one of their competitors, all right? What
Correct.
the UK did is they said that banks have to open up their systems into small modules called APIs, application programming interfaces. So what this means is that if I need to know where is the branch of ICICI Bank near my house,
Yeah.
you know, I want some utility to tell me. I mean, yes, I could Google it, but the first thing as a customer is I should be able to have some utility being able to pull that, which means a bank has to publish its branches. Okay. Then they started off, you have to be able to push out your deposit rates, fixed deposit rates, saving rates, and essentially said all this has to be pushed out as an API. Certain third-party companies were allowed to, who are, given a license, sort of, who had capital, right? Like our mutual funds, who had a capital, who could aggregate and push it out to customers. So as a customer, you or me, Shandra, if you were in the UK, we could compare and see whether Barclays is giving me better interest or whether it is Royal Bank of Scotland or Santander.
Right.
So they opened this up, called open banking. Essentially, the architecture is, so you say, okay, but that means the old banks will lose business. No, but what is happening is the old banks, yes, they may lose customers who would find other banks attractive, but they found that because they could tie up with fintechs that started building this utility, more customers were reaching to their banks through the fintechs. Okay. So it has exploded, and open banking, if you just Google it up or go to any of the government of UK website, you'll find open banking has picked up. And UK was one of the pioneers. The same time in Europe, it is called as PST2. It means Payment Services Directive 2. So open banking is big. Then Correct. It is gone heavily, US has all picked up more into investment, wealth management, robo. It is into consumer lending, digital, wealth management, payment services. It's every single, okay. And it has happened in Australia and India. After the UPI, we are seeing an account aggregator framework, which is along the lines of the open banking. Yeah. So it's there in every single business of financial services, from insurance to loans. In fact, most of us, we are still doing a lot of things online, Policy Bazaar, Bank Bazaar, right? Yeah. So that's where we're seeing that in every spectrum of the financial services world.
Absolutely. So while the money continues to be mainly entrusted with the banks because of the legacy trust, but I think around that entire, I think banks are being surrounded by all the side on fintech, and the customer interaction is now getting routed through parties which are directly not banks, right? So something that kind of the environment is opening up, Google Pay, WhatsApp, and so on and so forth.
Correct, right? Correct.
Okay, great. So now, Ravi, great. So good information. So telling us about the industry drivers, and also I was going to ask you about future developments, but I think you covered a lot of that. So just one thing, at Skill Edge, we basically help the graduates and postgraduates, look for careers in finance and other areas, right? Analytics, etc. So in terms of fintech, what can let's say the fresher, MCom, BCom, MBA, PGD, MBBA kind of, or maybe engineers also, right? How they can look at getting into fintech area, what they can do and how they can develop their career. Because this is a highly exciting field, and we hear astronomical salaries and great career paths, etc., right? So how can they sort of capitalize on this wave in fintech? What's your point of view on that?
Sure. I think it's a very good question. Probably there are many paths, right? But one of the things, and I think I can go back and you can go back. The business that we've in hasn't fundamentally changed, right? It's what is changing is the underlying technology to a great extent. Correct. Right? So as a new person, make sure you understand the business, because that will help you traverse a path, that even after 5 years, you understand the business. So one is to do your MBA, read about the business. There are lots of courses all available. So that is one part. Become at least understanding how the business works, right? Sometimes people forget the big picture, how the business actually makes money, right? And we see some examples in the latest in India, the listing of PTM, and they're not making money, but yeah. So try to understand how they make money, but try to understand whether you're learning retail banking, commercial banking, investment management, payments. At least read about it. And there's so much material, as I said, RBI website, Bank of England website. There is no shortage of material. Absolutely. Learn during your course, but try to read. And as you started, read the economic papers, try to understand and Even if you don't understand the terminology, ask people, Google it and learn. The other thing is, I think it is very important as future managers or people getting in. If you're not a technologist, even then you need to become aware of it, right? I'm talking of awareness in the sense, like we may be using a phone in the app, but at least we start understanding how to use the app beyond operating it, and we understand some nuances. But as
Correct.
managers, I think it is important to understand how this all comes together.
Absolutely.
So I would say there are different ways. In fact, I did a workshop last year which covered many of these things to explain as a story. But I think one of the things is, if you, I would say one is obviously there's a programming line, especially in the fintech world. You need to be a good programmer, whether you are into the Java, the JS, then getting into knowing Python or for data sciences, or you are very specialist in matrix algebra and all. You can get into AI, machine learning, which is also very important development in the fintech.
Absolutely.
But I would say there are so many courses available that gives you an orientation. Even if you spend 6 hours in a week, all right, try to start understanding how these use cases are. There's a lot of material being published by the central banks. Read about it, all right? It may not make sense in the first month, but the second month, you at least, realize that you may not know, you may know only 10%, but that is enough to at least ask the right question. So domain route, technology route, and trying to read. That's the only way I would suggest.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks a lot, Ravi. So I think so. A great, interacting with you today. We usually restrict the YouTube live session to about 15-20 minutes, but there's a lot that I have in mind to ask you. With your background, I know this background, so we have worked together also in the past. So with global banks and in the fintech area.
Absolutely.
But maybe for some other time, and today, thanks a lot for joining us and giving this really good perspective, because people may not have that kind of background or perspective and how to develop their career. That is the key thing, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thanks a lot for speaking for the benefit of our audience. Thank you very much for joining us today, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shailendra, and good luck to everyone listening onto this. And hopefully we'll meet up in some other session. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Happy
Thanks.
Ugadi.
See you
Happy
then. Yeah.
Gudi Padwa. Yeah.
Happy Ugadi and Gudi Padwa. Bye. See you.
Bye.